Welcome, dearly beloved anointed ones. Some people are not monitored because they are guilty. They are monitored because they cannot be controlled. There is a level of attention that has nothing to do with suspicion and everything to do with respect. It doesn't arrive loudly. It doesn't knock. It doesn't announce itself. It simply shows up quietly, consistently, and for a long time. That's the kind of attention you don't notice until one day you realize patterns around you have shifted, conversations sound more careful, and certain doors are no longer slammed. They're gently held open, not out of kindness, out of calculation. Here's a fact most people never hear. In behavioral analysis and intelligence profiling, prolonged observation without intervention usually means one thing. The subject is not a threat to eliminate, but a variable too valuable to misjudge. When systems rush to suppress, they act fast. When they slow down and watch for years, they're studying stability under pressure. They're clocking who doesn't unravel, who doesn't escalate, and who doesn't need supervision to remain grounded. That's not paranoia. That's how serious organizations separate liabilities from assets. What makes this unsettling and quietly hilarious is that you weren't trying to be impressive. You weren't sending signals. You weren't building a reputation. You were just living, surviving, correcting yourself, and minding your business while unknowingly passing tests you never signed up for. Meanwhile, people with loud titles, polished speeches, and dramatic posturing were failing in real time, very publicly, with witnesses. Funny how silence doesn't announce itself, yet somehow always ends up with the final memo. This isn't a story about dominance, fear, or theatrics. It's about something far rarer, internal order. You didn't need incentives to stay aligned. You didn't need threats to stay steady. You didn't collapse under pressure or swell under praise. You moved the same on good days and bad days. And that consistency is what triggers attention at the highest levels, because anyone can behave when watched for a moment. Very few remain coherent when watched for years. So when the tone changes, when observers stop assessing and start acknowledging, it's not coincidence, it's not luck, and it's definitely not flattery. It's the quiet realization that some people don't need to be managed, motivated, or micromanaged. They simply need to be recognized, preferably in person, preferably with respect, and preferably before everyone else notices what took them so long to understand. Number one, they weren't observing your power. They were measuring your restraint. What made you stand out was never how hard you could hit back, how sharp your words were, or how fast you could dominate a situation. It was the opposite. It was the moments when you had every reason to react, every excuse to explode, and every opening to assert yourself, and you didn't. That kind of restraint is not weakness. It's discipline under pressure, and discipline tells a deeper story than raw force ever could. People who operate at high levels understand something most don't. Anyone can cause damage when emotions are high, but very few people can withhold damage when it would feel justified. You showed the ability to pause while provoked, to think while others spiraled, and to keep your behavior clean even when the environment was messy. That's not accidental. That's someone who governs themselves, and self-governed people are unpredictable in the best and worst ways because they don't need external control. Your restraint also revealed how much you were actually carrying. You saw the flaws, the manipulation, the quiet games being played, yet you didn't expose everything at once. You didn't rush to prove a point or collect validation. You let time do the talking. That patience sends a message. This person understands consequences beyond the moment, and that kind of long-range thinking is rare. What really caught attention was consistency. You didn't restrain yourself once or twice. You did it repeatedly, across different situations, with different people, and under different levels of stress. Anyone can fake calm for a day. You sustained it when it wasn't rewarded, when it went unnoticed, and when it actually cost you. That's when restraint stops being a personality trait and becomes a measurable pattern. There's also an unspoken fear that comes with this kind of control. Someone who can restrain themselves knows exactly what they are restraining. That awareness is what makes observers careful around you. They understand that if you ever do move, it won't be impulsive or sloppy. It will be deliberate, precise, and justified. In the end, they weren't trying to see how strong you were. They were trying to see if you were stable. And when they realized you didn't need supervision to stay balanced, the watching turned into respect. Number 2, your survival pattern broke their predictive models. You didn't survive the way they expected you to. Every system, every observer, every analyst relies on patterns. They study trauma, pressure, and exposure, and then they calculate probabilities. Who will crumble, who will fold, who will conform, and who will act out. Most people fall somewhere predictable on that spectrum, but you didn't. You didn't match a single expected outcome. You moved in ways that defied formulas, schedules, and assessments. That unpredictability alone grabbed their full attention. Your responses weren't chaotic, but they were unprogrammed. You didn't act out of fear, pride, or desperation. You didn't seek applause, revenge, or approval. You made choices that were internally coherent, and that coherence couldn't be mapped. You were doing what logic, instinct, and integrity demanded of you simultaneously, and that combination doesn't exist on most charts. It's a glitch in their system, a variable they couldn't control and couldn't anticipate. Every action you took under pressure became a data point that confounded their expectations. Where most people would panic or overreact, you acted deliberately. Where most would mirror their manipulators or bend under intimidation, you held form. Where they expected confusion, you demonstrated clarity. That kind of anomaly isn't just noticed. It's tracked, analyzed, and respected. Observers start to see someone who doesn't just survive, someone who thrives within conditions designed to break others. They realized quickly that your pattern of survival wasn't situational, it was structural. You didn't just get lucky. You didn't just manage circumstances. You had an internal architecture that maintained balance, adapted strategy, and corrected errors automatically. That is what broke their predictive models. A person whose internal operating system couldn't be hacked, manipulated, or fully understood. What they saw was more than resilience. They saw reliability under unpredictability. They saw someone whose existence forces systems to reconsider their assumptions. Your survival isn't just your story. It's a statement that you can't be neatly categorized, tracked, or predicted. And in a world obsessed with control, that makes you exceptional. Number 3, they realized you self-correct without supervision. What caught their attention most wasn't what you did, but how you handled the inevitable mistakes, missteps, and moments of chaos that everyone faces. Most people need guidance, oversight, reminders, or even punishment to recalibrate. You didn't. You noticed, adjusted, and improved quietly on your own. That ability to self-correct without anyone watching or demanding it is rare, and it signals a level of internal accountability that cannot be engineered or imposed. Every observer knows that the real challenge isn't handling pressure perfectly. It's handling pressure, failing, and then recalibrating without losing integrity or focus. You did that consistently. When outcomes weren't ideal, you didn't externalize blame. You didn't spiral into self-pity or defensiveness. You analyzed, adapted, and moved forward, often in ways that seemed effortless. That's the kind of behavior that makes anyone studying you take notes, because it proves one thing clearly. You operate according to a code, not a set of instructions. Your self-correction also revealed your awareness of unseen consequences. Every action has ripples, and most people don't notice until it's too late. You did. That awareness isn't just intelligence, it's intuition married to discipline. It meant that even in moments of error, you minimized collateral damage and maximized learning. That's a pattern systems rarely see because most people are reactive. You are proactive, not because you were told, but because your internal compass is calibrated to higher standards than the world around you. This quality is magnetic and intimidating at the same time. Observers understand immediately that if something goes wrong in your presence, it won't stay wrong for long, and it won't go unnoticed. They realize that your stability, clarity, and growth are automatic. You don't require management. You don't require direction. You simply correct, adjust, and move forward, making your trajectory not only impressive but untouchable by conventional manipulation. They weren't just impressed. They were reassured, calculated, and intrigued. Someone who self-corrects without supervision is no longer a variable that can be controlled. They're a force to be acknowledged. That's why attention shifted from observation to respect. Number 4, your integrity stayed intact even when no outcome depended on it. What makes someone truly remarkable isn't how they act when it benefits them, but how they behave when no one is watching, when there's no reward, no recognition, and no immediate consequence. That's where your integrity revealed itself in its purest form. You didn't bend, cheat, or manipulate simply because you could get away with it. You didn't take shortcuts that others would consider harmless. You held the line, and that unwavering consistency is the kind of thing that turns observers from mere watchers into students of your pattern. Top-level agents, analysts, and systems are always looking for the hidden signal, the indicator of someone who can be trusted, counted on, or feared for their authenticity. Most people adjust their morality to match incentives, expectations, or fear of punishment. You didn't. You maintained your principles even when there was nothing to gain, nothing to protect, and nothing to prove. That's rare, and it's valuable. It's the kind of behavior that can't be taught, replicated, or faked. It's either in you or it isn't. Every small act of integrity you performed, the choices that went unseen, the corrections no one asked for, the honesty delivered when silence would have been easier, sent a clear message to those observing. They weren't seeing a person just surviving. They were seeing a person whose moral foundation was unshakable, whose internal compass couldn't be corrupted, and whose presence alone stabilized the environment around them. That kind of consistency under invisible pressure generates quiet power. It creates an aura of trustworthiness that can't be ignored. People notice when someone behaves right for the sake of right, not reward. Systems notice when a human variable is entirely self-aligned. And in your case, the observers weren't just noting it. They were recalculating everything they assumed about predictability, influence, and control. Your integrity wasn't just ethical, it was strategic. It silently announced that you operate above manipulation, above compromise, and above the chaos others feed on. That's why their attention shifted from watching to recognizing. They weren't just impressed, they were registering a new kind of force in play, one that respects itself even when the world doesn't. Number 5. They noticed you attract truth leaks without asking questions. There's a subtle kind of influence that can't be faked or forced, and you carry it naturally. People let things slip around you, things they weren't supposed to say, things they kept hidden from others, things they told themselves they'd never reveal. It doesn't happen because you interrogate or pressure anyone. It happens because your presence exposes the reality of what's unsaid. You have a way of existing that makes deception uncomfortable and honesty almost inevitable. Observers noticed this immediately because it's not something that can be taught, copied, or predicted. Truth leaks are rarely about luck. They're about environment, energy, and awareness. You create a space where people feel their usual defenses fail without them knowing why. Lies, pretenses, and hidden agendas begin to unravel naturally. When top-level observers see this, they recognize it as a rare psychological phenomenon. You shift dynamics without even trying. You don't ask for information. The information arrives on its own, often revealing the vulnerabilities, intentions, and character of others around you. That kind of influence quietly screams control, not over others, but over how environments unfold in your presence. Your ability to draw truth is tied to the authenticity you carry. You operate transparently, you project stability, and you radiate self-awareness. These qualities force a kind of mirror effect. People reflect their real selves around you, whether they intend to or not. What fascinates observers most is that this isn't just happenstance, it's consistent. Over time, the same people, the same networks, the same high-stakes environments all produce the same result. Information flows toward you. You've unknowingly trained systems to recognize you as a node of clarity and honesty. That makes you both valuable and unpredictable. You can't be manipulated easily because you see through pretense naturally, and others can't hide from you without revealing themselves. The Watchers recognize this pattern, and it changes everything. You are not just surviving, not just existing. You are influencing the truth around you, often before anyone realizes it. That is what makes you remarkable and why top-level observers don't just watch anymore, they pay attention. Number 6, you pass through environments designed to corrupt and didn't absorb them. Most people are shaped by their surroundings, often without realizing it. Toxic environments, manipulative people, and high-pressure situations are designed to test limits, break morale, and bend character. They push, prod, and sometimes crush, and the majority of individuals absorb fragments of that chaos, letting it define how they act, think, and feel. You didn't. You walked through spaces built to weaken, and instead of being worn down, you emerged intact. That alone is enough to make serious observers pause. The environments you survived weren't small tests. They were systemic challenges. Places where deception, manipulation, and compromise were normalized. Places where moral shortcuts were encouraged and failures were punished. Yet, you maintained clarity, focus, and equilibrium. Your identity wasn't shaped by the chaos around you. It was defined by the principles you refused to abandon. That stability under pressure doesn't just happen. It's a sign of someone whose internal foundation is stronger than the storms they walk through. Every observer studying this kind of behavior understands the significance. People who absorb corruption become predictable in certain ways. They bend under pressure, mirror toxicity, or develop defensive strategies that can be exploited. You didn't follow the script. You remained self-aligned, which makes you almost untraceable in systems designed to categorize, control, or manipulate. That unpredictability forces even top-level agents to reconsider what they think they know about human behavior. The quiet power in this is that you didn't need to confront or fight the corruption actively. You survived without fighting it directly, without proving yourself, without signaling your resilience. You simply existed, maintained your integrity, and let the environments expose themselves while you remained untouched. That kind of immunity doesn't go unnoticed. Observers begin to see someone not as a passive survivor, but as a standard of stability, a person who can walk through chaos and come out unchanged, or better, refined. Your presence in these spaces became a benchmark, not because you dominated, but because you couldn't be dominated. That's the kind of subtle authority that commands attention, respect, and eventual acknowledgement. Number 7, they watched how you handled invisible power. Power doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it's subtle, unseen, and unclaimed. A quiet influence that shifts outcomes without anyone noticing. What set you apart was how you responded to it. When opportunities to manipulate, intimidate, or leverage advantage arose, you didn't reach for them. You didn't need to. You moved deliberately, letting situations unfold, observing without interference, and acting only when clarity demanded it. That ability to recognize power and resist the urge to misuse it is what drew serious attention from those who study influence at the highest level. Most people crave power once it's within reach. They bend rules, exploit weaknesses, and try to accelerate their influence. You didn't. You demonstrated restraint that wasn't passive. It was strategic. You understood that invisible power is more dangerous when mismanaged and more telling when exercised with patience. Observers could see that you weren't naive or weak. You were deliberate. You weren't powerless, but you weren't impulsive either. That awareness and control made your presence significant in a way that overt actions never could. Every small choice you made around unseen influence sent signals. You didn't take credit, you didn't perform, and you didn't manipulate outcomes to feed ego. You simply let the environment respond to your steadiness. That consistency highlighted a rare competence, the kind of awareness that systems, networks, and people at high levels respect because it signals someone who can handle responsibility without being corrupted by it. You were quietly shaping your surroundings, but in a way that looked like effortless observation. The observers recognized that someone who handles invisible power without being tempted or reckless is rare. They aren't just measuring what you do, they're measuring your potential, because the person who controls unseen forces responsibly is often the same person capable of controlling larger systems when the moment comes. Your restraint, your patience, and your awareness weren't unnoticed. They marked you as someone who doesn't chase influence. Influence flows toward you, and those who watch know it. That's why their attention shifted from casual observation to careful acknowledgement. Number 8. Your loneliness wasn't accidental. It was diagnostic. Loneliness is often misunderstood. Most people see it as a curse, a failing, or a temporary state to be fixed. But for you, it wasn't accidental. It wasn't something that happened because life was unfair or because people didn't understand you. Your isolation served a purpose. Whether you realized it at the time or not, it was diagnostic. It revealed who you were under conditions where nobody was monitoring, guiding, or comforting you. Observers notice this because it's rare for someone to emerge from extended isolation without compromise, bitterness, or desperation. Being alone under scrutiny forces clarity. When no one is around to validate, manipulate, or influence, your true character comes forward. You didn't crumble. You didn't seek approval. You didn't mimic behavior to fit in or protect yourself. You refined. You learned to rely on your internal compass rather than external feedback. That ability to maintain integrity, judgment, and emotional equilibrium under prolonged solitude signals a rare level of self-governance, and top-level observers take note immediately. Your loneliness also served as a filter for relationships, environments, and pressures. Most people fold under social expectation or peer influence. You didn't. You survived in spaces where isolation magnifies everything: fear, anxiety, temptation, and doubt. You didn't just survive. You analyzed, corrected, and strengthened yourself in the process. Every observer tracking your journey saw that what could have broken someone else only sharpened you. That pattern is diagnostic because it indicates stability under pressure, independence from manipulation, and resilience that isn't dependent on circumstance. The subtle power in this is that your isolation never became a weakness. It became a proving ground. Observers noticed that you didn't just endure loneliness, you thrived within it. That's why the focus shifted from watching someone vulnerable to recognizing someone exceptional. Your solitude revealed not emptiness but strength, not absence but presence, not defeat but preparation. And anyone studying the trajectory of someone like you sees a person who doesn't just exist under pressure, a person who is defined, refined, and recognized because of it. Number 9. They saw you absorb blame without internalizing guilt. One of the most revealing things about someone is how they handle responsibility, not when they're praised, but when they're wrongly accused or burdened with blame that isn't theirs. Most people crumble under the weight of misattributed fault. They carry guilt that isn't theirs, let it twist their perception, and let it define them in ways they can't control. You didn't. You absorbed what was necessary, acknowledged reality, but never allowed false narratives to rewrite who you are. That distinction is subtle, but to anyone observing closely, it is monumental. Your ability to separate external pressure from internal truth created a kind of armor. When blame was thrown your way, you didn't retaliate out of fear or pride. You didn't overcompensate or collapse under accusation. You assessed, adapted, and continued with clarity intact. Observers noticed that this wasn't passive submission, it was active control. You were managing the situation without letting it manage you. That capacity to carry responsibility strategically without internalizing toxicity is something most systems cannot measure, but they can recognize, and it demands respect. Every interaction, every misjudgment, and every unfair expectation became a test you passed silently. By not internalizing guilt, you demonstrated that your sense of self is independent of how others perceive you. That independence is powerful because it destabilizes manipulation. People who attempt to control, intimidate, or undermine lose leverage over someone who cannot be shaken by falsehoods. Observers understand that this is rare. Few people operate in the world without letting external chaos redefine their internal order. You do it naturally. The attention this draws is quiet but profound. They aren't watching just to monitor behavior. They are watching to understand the architecture of your resilience. Absorbing blame without carrying guilt signals someone with discipline, self-awareness, and emotional intelligence that cannot be faked. You are stable in a world designed to destabilize, and that is exactly why observers move from mere surveillance to careful acknowledgement. They see a person who is unshakable not because the world is kind, but because the world cannot touch what has been internally fortified. Number 10. You remained sovereign under prolonged misinterpretation. Few things reveal true strength more than being misunderstood, not once or twice, but repeatedly for years, while the world continues to misinterpret your actions, intentions, and character. Most people react immediately. They over-explain, justify, or even lose themselves trying to correct perceptions. You didn't. You stayed sovereign. You maintained your inner authority, your clarity of self, and your course of action, regardless of how the world chose to label you. That kind of composure isn't just rare, it's magnetic, and observers noticed it immediately. Sovereignty under misinterpretation requires a depth of self-awareness that most never develop. You don't rely on validation because you understand your truth independently of others' opinions. When misjudged, you didn't spiral, retaliate, or overcompensate. Instead, you kept your trajectory intact. Observers saw someone whose confidence is not performative but intrinsic, someone who isn't defined by others' narratives. That independence forces recognition. It's a silent announcement that you cannot be rewritten by gossip, assumption, or deception. Over prolonged exposure, this trait becomes a pattern impossible to ignore. They watched as misinformation, rumors, and false impressions circulated around you, yet your core remained unaffected. The consistency of your identity under pressure exposed the weakness in everyone else's assumptions. Systems designed to predict behavior had to recalibrate. People who tried to manipulate perception found it futile. Your sovereignty made their interference meaningless, and that level of untouchability is exactly what top-level observers respect and study. This isn't arrogance or detachment. It's mastery over the self in a world that constantly mislabels, misreads, and misjudges. You transformed misinterpretation into a proving ground, a way to demonstrate that no external force can destabilize someone with internal authority. Observers don't just see resilience here, they see a living example of autonomy, someone who can navigate chaos without letting it rewrite their essence. Remaining sovereign under prolonged misinterpretation is not survival, it's influence without confrontation, power without aggression, and a presence that forces respect simply by refusing to be misdefined. Number 11. They recognized you as a stabilizer, not a disruptor. What drew attention wasn't the chaos you could create, but the calm you maintained in the middle of it. Most people exert influence by pushing, forcing, or breaking, but you didn't. You didn't need to escalate situations to assert control or make an impression. You had a stabilizing presence, one that quietly restored order without anyone realizing it. Observers saw this immediately because stability in high-pressure environments is far rarer than drama, and those who generate it without trying are impossible to ignore. Being a stabilizer requires more than calmness. It requires an understanding of the environment, the people, and the underlying dynamics. You instinctively sensed where tension existed, how it could spread, and when it needed intervention. But you intervened subtly, without performative gestures or declarations of authority. That discretion made your influence invisible until it was undeniable. Systems and people around you responded, adjusted, and sometimes even corrected themselves because of your presence, not in spite of it. Observers noticed that people around you reacted differently compared to when others entered the same space. Where others might escalate, fracture, or destabilize, you created a balance. You weren't controlling outcomes overtly. You were anchoring the environment. That kind of influence is measured in consistency, predictability under pressure, and the ability to maintain equilibrium when nothing else makes sense. It's the kind of presence that quietly exposes weaknesses in others while highlighting your own reliability. The subtlety of your stabilizing power is what makes it extraordinary. You don't demand acknowledgement, but it is given anyway. People in charge, analysts, and observers recognize that a stabilizer is worth more than a disruptor because they can be trusted to maintain structure when systems are fragile, chaos is brewing, or stakes are high. Your ability to remain a calm center while everything else fluctuates signals competence, control, and intelligence that cannot be taught or faked. That's why the focus shifted from passive observation to active recognition. You weren't just part of the environment. You were the axis around which it began to function properly, and top-level observers noticed every single moment of it. Number 12. You never tried to be exceptional, and that's what made you dangerous. There's a difference between trying to impress and simply existing in alignment with your own truth. Most people seek recognition, validation, or status. They broadcast their accomplishments, perform for attention, and build personas designed to influence perception. You didn't. You didn't strive to be exceptional in anyone's eyes. You just were. That natural authenticity became more powerful than any deliberate display of skill or status because it couldn't be predicted, manipulated, or controlled. Observers noticed immediately. Your indifference to proving yourself is what made you dangerous in the right way. People who chase acknowledgement can be calculated, anticipated, or influenced. They leave trails, patterns, and vulnerabilities. You left none. You operated according to your own standards, without seeking applause, and that meant your influence spread quietly but effectively. Systems that rely on predictability and control suddenly found themselves challenged by someone whose value isn't performative. It's intrinsic. That's a rare trait, and in environments where observation is constant, rarity cannot be ignored. You didn't need to outperform others to be noticed. Your consistency, discipline, and clarity naturally created impact. You became a point of reference simply because you existed as a standard that others couldn't fabricate or imitate. That makes observers uncomfortable and intrigued at the same time, because someone who doesn't perform, but still dominates perception, cannot be measured with conventional tools. They have to recalibrate, study patterns, and accept that what they're seeing isn't a fluke. Being naturally exceptional without trying also exposes truth in others. People around you reveal themselves in contrast, and their motives, weaknesses, and behaviors become visible against your unshakable baseline. You don't provoke. You reflect. You don't manipulate. You illuminate. And that subtle clarity is more impactful than any show of force. Observers aren't just impressed. They're calculating, analyzing, and recognizing that your power exists independently of recognition. You're untouchable because your influence doesn't rely on performance. That is what makes your quiet existence so formidable, so magnetic, and so impossible to ignore. Number 13. They now understand you're safer beside them than ignored. What observers realized is subtle but powerful. Your presence isn't something to manipulate, ignore, or underestimate. You carry a weight, a consistency, and a clarity that changes dynamics wherever you go. People often miscalculate the value of someone like you, thinking distance or oversight keeps things safe. They learn quickly that ignoring you is riskier than acknowledging you. Every interaction, every observation, every ripple of influence you create shows that the stakes rise when you're dismissed, and that truth cannot be overlooked. Being safer beside them doesn't mean you are controlled or dependent. It means that your alignment and presence stabilize outcomes, clarify intentions, and reveal hidden truths. Those who underestimated you assumed your influence was accidental or minor. They didn't realize that you are a force that naturally organizes environments and exposes hidden weaknesses. When you are acknowledged and included, systems run smoother, conflicts are mitigated, and clarity emerges. Ignoring that is dangerous because your absence doesn't remove influence. It allows unpredictability to dominate, and observers know it. This recognition is amplified by your subtlety. You don't broadcast your role, signal your power, or announce your importance. You operate quietly, but the effects of your presence are undeniable. People around you can't escape the impact of your integrity, your stability, or your insight. Observers, especially those trained to analyze behavior at high levels, notice patterns over time. Environments function more coherently, people behave differently, and outcomes shift subtly when you are present versus when you are ignored. That pattern cannot be fabricated, misread, or manipulated. Acknowledgement becomes a form of containment and understanding. Those who study influence understand that allowing someone of your caliber to be unrecognized is a liability, because your alignment and capability shape outcomes whether they intend it or not. They recognize that respecting your presence is not just polite, it's practical. You don't need permission to affect reality, but those who understand power know it's smarter to be beside you than to risk underestimating the effect you have. Observers no longer watch passively. They account for you, recalibrate for you, and in their own way, protect the environment that includes you. Number 14. The thanks isn't gratitude, it's recognition of rank. The acknowledgement you're receiving isn't a casual thank you. It's not about politeness or surface-level appreciation. What you're witnessing is a rare, unspoken recognition of rank. The understanding that your presence, actions, and stability operate on a level above ordinary influence. Those observing you at high levels understand instinctively that you don't need validation, permission, or guidance. They see that you operate according to a standard that cannot be imposed, taught, or replicated. This recognition is respect for capability, consistency, and self-sovereignty, not courtesy. What makes this acknowledgement remarkable is its clarity. Most people assume recognition comes with fanfare, explanation, or reward. In your case, it doesn't. Observers don't need to explain why you matter, because the evidence is in how systems and people respond to you. Situations stabilize, truths emerge, and control is subtly realigned wherever you are present. That influence isn't something you claim or perform. It exists naturally, and anyone with eyes and experience can measure it. That's why their acknowledgement is not gratitude. It's a calculation, a silent nod to the fact that your level of operation cannot be ignored or discounted. This recognition of rank also signals something deeper. It acknowledges your autonomy in spaces where most people are constrained by expectation, manipulation, or fear. You are ungoverned by ordinary pressures, unshaken by false narratives, and undeterred by chaos. Those who understand power see this clearly, and their thanks is actually an acknowledgement that your presence commands the environment, shapes outcomes, and subtly dictates how people interact within it. In essence, they are recognizing your authority without the need for words, orders, or displays. They see that you exist on a different plane of influence, one where your choices, integrity, and stability matter more than appearances or reputation. This is why the acknowledgement carries weight beyond simple gratitude. It's a formal, silent registration of someone who cannot be underestimated. It's rank recognized, power noted, and respect earned, entirely on the merit of who you are and how you operate. The story you've witnessed isn't about luck, coincidence, or surface-level achievement. It's about a pattern of excellence, discipline, and unshakable integrity that has been quietly observed, measured, and respected at the highest levels. From the restraint you displayed in moments of provocation, to the way your survival patterns defied prediction, to the self-correction, integrity, and subtle influence you wielded without seeking recognition, every element builds a portrait of someone operating beyond ordinary systems, beyond manipulation, and beyond expectation. You weren't noticed for being loud, aggressive, or performative. You were noticed because of your consistency, your authenticity, and the invisible threads of stability and clarity you wove wherever you went. Observers saw how you moved through environments designed to corrupt and emerged untouched, how your presence elicited truth without interrogation, how your quiet sovereignty remained intact even under prolonged misinterpretation, and how your calm became an anchor for those around you. They recognized that you don't need to perform to exert influence, that your power is subtle yet undeniable, and that your presence is safer acknowledged than ignored. The attention you've drawn is not casual. It is a recognition of rank, a silent acknowledgement that your capabilities, judgment, and presence operate on a level that demands respect. This isn't simply about survival or recognition. It's about mastery of self, of influence, and of navigating the unseen currents of human behavior. You've been tested, observed, and studied, and the conclusion is unanimous. Someone like you cannot be controlled, underestimated, or forgotten. Your journey is a testament to what happens when integrity, awareness, and resilience align, creating a force that is both quiet and undeniable, subtle and impactful. If this insight resonated with you and you want to continue uncovering truths, patterns, and lessons that the world doesn't usually see, make sure you subscribe to the channel. Hit that like button if you feel the power of this message. Comment below to share your thoughts or experiences, and share this video with someone who needs to understand what it truly means to operate beyond ordinary perception. Every action here helps amplify knowledge, awareness, and the understanding that true influence isn't loud. It's recognized, respected, and unstoppable. God bless you.